Many thanks to my supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to join them, check the link in the description. But now, enjoy the video. Gran Turismo challenge runs. They become pretty popular over the last few years, huh? Whether it's putting a restriction on what type of car you can use, not being able to upgrade your cars or even buy one at all, they come in many different forms. Of course, the idea of giving yourself an artificial limitation to make a game more difficult is in no way specific to this series. Pokemon Nuzlocke are probably the best example. However, much like Nuzlocke, I think that a big part of the appeal of a GT challenge run comes from how it emphasizes certain aspects of the game, particularly in the older titles. There's always an element of strategy at play when it comes to deciding which cars to use and which race events to do, all to reach the ultimate goal of beating the game. Then, when you add a challenge on top of that, it takes that experience to another level and really tests your knowledge of these games. As time has gone on and the market for videos like these has become more saturated, this has naturally led to people trying to come up with more outlandish challenge run ideas. And so, when I decided that I wanted to do a challenge run of my own, I knew that it had to be a totally unique idea that nobody else has really done before. In real-life racing, there's always been a concept that's fascinated me: winless champions. It's the idea that a certain team or driver never manages to prove they're the best in any single race, and yet, through sheer consistency, they still manage to come out on top over the full season. Cases like these don't come around very often, but that got me thinking. A Gran Turismo career mode is typically about winning as many races as you can, so would it be possible to beat one of these games without winning a single race at all? That's what I'm going to attempt today, but the next question is, in which of these games? Well, firstly, GT6 and GT7 are out of the question. This is because the reward and completion requirements in both are for finishing in the top 3, including in the final championship. What this means is that whether you win every race, or finish second, or even third, it doesn't really make much difference. So for the sake of this challenge, that kind of defeats the point. That's one of the reasons why most challenge runs are done on the older GT games anyway. However, with these older games, we find another issue. In GT3 and GT4, for example, completing single race events are necessary to beat the game. This means that you have to finish first in these races. There's no way around it. So, with all of that said, the game I decided on for this challenge is Gran Turismo 5. I feel like it offers the perfect balance, with its career still being structured like the older games, but not requiring you to win any single race events. All you have to do is beat the GT World Championship, so in theory, this is entirely possible. Now, to make this challenge even harder, there are a couple of extra rules I'm going to follow. 1, I'm not allowed to replay any events. Once a race has been completed, I can't do it again. And 2, I'm not allowed to do any of the special events. This is because the rewards they give would make this challenge way too easy, in my opinion. Okay then, with all of that said, let's get down to business. Can you beat Gran Turismo 5 without winning a single race? Let's find out. Well, here we are. To welcome us into GT World, we're given 20,000 credits to buy our first car. So it's off to the used dealership, where I quickly find many great options: the Mazda Demio, Honda Life Step Van, and 2 Nissan Cubes. The gods are definitely smiling on me today. But despite those, I instead opt for a first-gen Mazda Roadster, the quintessential starter car if you ask me. Now, because I can't win a single race, the speed of the car isn't super important, but it will still be useful, as you'll see later on. However, what matters more is having a diverse range of cars that I can use in many different events. Given that prize cars will be hard to come by, this is something I'll always have to consider. Anyway, it's off to the Sunday Cup for our first race at Autumn Ring Mini. All I have to do is follow the Mazda 6 in front to secure the first of many second place finishes, I'm sure. I then follow this up with the same at Grand Valley East and then Tsukuba to tick off my first event. Now, an important difference between GT5 and most other GT games is its level system. By completing races, you earn XP, which increases your level. This level dictates not only which race events you can enter, but also which cars you can even buy. It was quite a controversial system, but the upshot is that earning XP is going to be very important in this run. With the Sunday Cup done, and with some extra credits in the bank, I decide to install a couple of cheap upgrades on my Mazda, before heading to the Compact Car World Cup. Now, what's important about this event is that it's a 3-race championship. Now, of course, I'm not allowed to win any races, but I can still win championships like these. It all involves playing the points game. The point system in GT5 works like this. Finishing first gives 100 points, second 75 points, third 60 points, and then reducing by 10 points every position down to 7th. If I finish second in every race, I can still win the championship overall as long as my opponents finish in mixed up positions, thus taking points off each other. In the first race at London, I finished second to the Peugeot 307, so for the second race at Madrid, I have to make sure that 307 doesn't win. Yes, this involves a bit of dirty driving, but needs must. To be honest, I should have done even more, as the 307 still comes back to finish third, and I now head to the final race behind both it and the Mini Cooper that won race 2. However, as long as I can finish second at Cape Ring, with both of them behind me, I can still win the title. And so I hold them off, allowing a Mini 1 to get in front and take the win, with my second place enough to take the trophy by just 5 points. And that is how you can win a championship without winning a single race. Now, it wasn't 100% necessary to win this event, but given that you earn a nice credits bonus and a prize car, it's definitely worth doing. The prize car in question for this event is the Hommel Berlinette, a very good car to get this early in the game. Sadly, I don't have a use for it right now, but I'm sure it'll come in handy later on. For now, I head over to the used dealers to pick up a Toyota Vitz, and then spend a bit of extra cash upgrading it. I want this car for the FF challenge, and despite being slightly underpowered compared to the competition, I'm still able to secure second in all 3 races. Whilst I've got the Vitz, I also tackle the one-make Vitz/Yaris race, where I just about managed to hold on to second at the line. By this point, I've reached level 6 and unlocked the Amateur Series, the first event of which being the Clubman Cup. Now, unlike every other game that it's appeared in GT5, the Clubman Cup is a championship event, which gives us another chance to earn extra prizes. For it, I decide to bust out the Berlinette, but I also added a few minor upgrades to help cope with the increased competition. In the first race at Tsukuba, I quickly get into second, but after that, I simply can't catch the Toyota MR2 in the lead. As such, this marks the first race where I finish as the runner-up on merit. To give myself some extra margin, I upgrade to sports hard tyres for race 2, but with the MR2 proving to be the class of the field, I have to employ some interesting tactics. Look, I never said I was going to keep it clean, and with the MR2 being relegated to 11th, all I have to do is follow it home in race 3 to seal another championship. As it turns out, the reward for murdering an MR2 is a Mugen Civic race car. Neat. Anyway, it's back to the Mazda to do the one-make Roadster Cup, and then back over to the Berlinette for the French Championship. Now, something you'll realise about GT5 is that they love to just put championship in event names even if they're just single race events. This event is one such example. But with that done, I decide to clear out the other level 7 events, the Japan 90s Challenge, again with my Roadster, before taking on the Euro Hot Hatch Championship. Yet again, it's not actually a championship, and given that you don't even have to drive a hot hatch, it's back over to the Berlinette to add a couple more second places to my tally. All in all, the Amateur Series had gone pretty smoothly. I'm now level 10, meaning I've unlocked the Professional Series, so the GT World Championship is already in sight. However, I've now hit a bit of a roadblock. The only event available to me is the Mini Challenge, but I don't want to spend my limited amount of credits on a car that I'd only really use for one event. The same is true when it comes to staying in the Amateur Series and doing some of the events I had missed there, as I'm trying to plan ahead by saving my credits. So instead, I go with my third option and head to the License Center. Yep, another unique quirk of GT5 is that the license tests are entirely optional, and only serve as a source of XP and prize cars. This is why I had avoided them until now, but with my current predicament, I don't really have much choice. Now, something else that's unique about GT5's licenses is that they include some tests where you have to overtake other cars. Now, I'm pretty certain that these don't count towards the total win stats, but just for the sake of argument, I decided not to win any of these either. This means the max that I can achieve is all silver, which I do on the National B, National A, and International C licenses. As well as the XP, which gets me up to level 12, I also earn a decent selection of prize cars, a couple of which I sell off. I also get rid of the kart I earned way back at level 1, and the Mugen Civic race car. Despite how cool I think it is, I realised that I don't have much use for it, so it has to go. But now, being level 12 and having more than 100,000 credits to play with, I can put my plan into action. Because what I really want is a Corvette Z06. This car would be extremely important going forwards, so I feel it justified the 94,500 credits I spend on it. With this car, I'm able to breeze through the Muscle Car Championship, which again isn't a championship, and then head for the Supercar Festival. This event would be a major step up over anything I'd done before, so I spent almost all of my remaining money upgrading the engine, tyres, and doing weight reduction. I even stick on a rear wing just for good measure. But ultimately, this would prove to be somewhat overkill, as I'm able to secure second in all 3 races without too much trouble. At Daytona, I even follow a fellow Z06 home for a Corvette 1-2. By now, I've reached level 13, but still lack just a bit of XP to unlock the GT World Championship. So I head back to the license center, and 10 tests later I have my International B license. Aside from the prize cars, more importantly, I've now reached the magic level 14. Now, other than its strong cost versus performance factor, there was another major reason why I wanted this Corvette. In GT5, it's one of the handful of cars that can have a racing modification, turning this street car into a full-blown racing machine. Compared to buying an equivalent race car, it offers much better value. However, the price tag of 264,500 credits is still considerably more than I'm capable of. So instead, I have to make do with adding fully customizable suspension, transmission, and one stage of engine tuning to create my cost-effective version of the already cost-effective option. With that done, it's time to take on the GT World Championship. In a grid filled with bespoke GT cars, it's hard not to feel like my Corvette is the odd one out. But despite that, the first race at Lasarth goes smoothly. The AI battle hard for the win, but in the end, I'm still able to take second comfortably with the Autobax NSX just in front. So, heading into race 2 at the Nordschleife, my goal is clear. Do not let the NSX win again. With it starting in 5th, this makes my job a little bit easier. After protecting the 2 Nissans in 1st and 2nd, as we head onto the Dottinger Hoa, both the Epson NSX and Autobax NSX are poised to attack. After it finished down in 8th in race 1, ideally I want the Motul GTR to win, so I push it past the 350 ZLM. However, I don't want the Autobax NSX to gain any places, and I still need to finish second myself. It's a tricky balancing act, and I almost lose control on the grass, but I just managed to keep it together to secure my ideal result. I now lead the standings, with the Autobax NSX, my nearest rival, 10 points back. And so on to race 3 at Madrid. I'm able to hold up the NSX slightly in the first few corners, but it seems to disappear on lap 2. Only after checking the replay would I find out what actually happened. In trying to get around the Falcon GTR, it drives straight into the wall at the final chicane, causing a roadblock and tumbling down the order to eventually finish 9th. Meanwhile, at the front, I help the Jaguar XJ13 get into 3rd behind myself, and then the 350 ZLM. 3 races down, and I now have a 25-point lead from the 350Z. Not taking any chances, in race 4 at Cape Ring I hold it up, allowing both the Epson NSX and Autobax NSX to get past. All I have to do is then follow the Epson car home for another 2nd place. Now with a 50-point lead heading to the final race at Grand Valley, as long as I finish 2nd, I still win the championship no matter who wins the race. To begin with, the 350Z leads, before the Epson NSX makes a bold move at the start of the final lap. Either way, it makes no difference to me, as I cross the line in 2nd, thus winning the GT World Championship. The spoils of which include a healthy championship bonus and a Bugatti Veyron, but most importantly, the ending credits. And with that, I have proven that you can indeed beat Gran Turismo 5 without winning a single race. However, our story isn't finished just yet. Some of you might remember that in 2023, my final video of the year was a roundup of everything that happened in my first full year of YouTube. As you can see, this year's final video is a bit different, but there is something that I would like to do again. Every month, I host a Q&A for my Patreon supporters, and just like 12 months ago, I'd like to answer their questions for December's Q&A in this video. There's only a handful of questions to get through, but if you just want to get back to the main video, then head to the timestamp on screen. Okay then, the first question comes from The Bat, who says, what was your best/favourite moment you've ever had on any Gran Turismo game? Pretty simple question, but one that could go in a few different directions. I would be tempted to look at my GT Sport days when I raced against the likes of Mick Hizal, Koke Lopez, Valerio Gallo, and many more top drivers. This was back in 2018 to 2019. In terms of specific moments from this time, there were a few. Some great battles and good results, but the one that stands out the most for me was in a Manufacturers' Cup race at Tokyo Expressway. I managed to qualify on pole in an absolutely stacked lobby. Honestly, that was probably the greatest lap I've ever done in any Gran Turismo game. It was a seriously good feeling. But although I would feel justified to pick that moment, I think my final answer is much more grounded. I have this very vivid memory of playing GT3 back in the day. I was probably only 5 or 6 years old. I remember I'd gotten further into the game than I ever had before and decided to take on my first long championship. I don't remember which one exactly, but I do remember that Special Stage Route 11 was one of the tracks. Anyway, what I clearly recall is that when I started, it was daylight, but by the time I finished, it had gone dark. In fact, I was so focused on beating the events that I didn't even realize. It was only when my parents came into the room and turned the lights on that I noticed. I should mention that as a kid, I was afraid of the dark, so this was pretty unusual, but it just speaks to how engrossed I was. The feeling of accomplishment I felt after I won that championship is something that I'll probably never forget. It's one of those core memories that really made me fall in love with the classic Gran Turismo career mode. Alright, next up is Jude, who wants to know, what are my thoughts on my first Gran Turismo and the Prologue games? Do I think they add to the series in their own way, or just exist as demos or tutorials for the full games? Well, I'll be perfectly honest here, I haven't played my first Gran Turismo, and I don't intend to. Why is that? Well, it's clearly not aimed at someone like me, so I have no reason to care. A bite-sized version of what is, in my opinion, already the most watered-down Gran Turismo just doesn't appeal to me. And, well, that's kind of the point. The whole aim of this demo is to bring in a wider audience by making the series more accessible. Despite that, I think the title My First Gran Turismo has been completely lost on a lot of people. I've seen many try to judge the demo based on their own prior experience with the series, but it just has no relevance. To put it simply, if this demo isn't actually your first Gran Turismo, then your opinion on it is pretty much worthless. It's not meant for you. As for the idea of demos or prologues generally, I definitely think they have their place. With GT4 and GT5 Prologue, they served as neat previews of the full game and also helped to fill the gap between releases. Of course, the nature of demos is that once the full game is released, they don't really serve much purpose anymore. This is something I found very true when I revisited GT5 Prologue earlier this year. It's a game that I played back when it was new and enjoyed very much, but playing it in current day just feels so pointless and, honestly, boring. But just because that's the case now doesn't mean that there was no value in making it in the first place. The situation with My First Gran Turismo is different because GT7 has already been out for almost 3 years. I'm really not sure why they couldn't have brought it out before the full game released. It would have still served as an introduction for new players, but then would have also had value for more experienced players like myself, much in the same way as the prologues. Was it really so important to have it coincide with PlayStation's 30th anniversary? It's just a weird decision, but like I said, I don't really care that much. Now, our third and final question comes from Darth Bob. If you had to pick 2 cars, one race spec car and one road car, which 2 cars would you choose and why? Both cars have to have appeared in Gran Turismo at some point. To make it a little more interesting, would you change which road car you chose if you had to daily drive it? Now, this is an interesting one. I'll actually answer the race car first, because for me, there is one obvious answer. GT has featured many unique race cars over the years, but I would have to pick the 2000 Castrol Mugen NSX. The attachment I have to this car from the first time I ever saw it in GT3 is immense. Also, it is somewhat relevant to this video as it famously took Honda's first GT500 title without winning a race all season. To be able to own and drive it would really be a dream come true. Second to that would probably be the Ferrari 330 P4, just because I think it's one of, if not the most beautiful car design of all time. And I am a sucker for a 12-cylinder Ferrari. And I suppose that leads us to the road car. This one would be tougher to call. I've always imagined how cool it would be to own a Ferrari 250 GT and just drive it on the road like a normal car. Some of my other personal favourites to own would be the Ferrari F50 and Porsche 911 GT1 Strassen version. But if we do consider the need to daily drive it, then my answer once again comes from Honda, the Civic Type R. This is actually my attainable dream car, and I do have plans to own one eventually. I've been a massive Civic fanboy for a while. I even have one of my own, a 2011 Type S model. But the current Type R is just so different. It's essentially a 320 horsepower sports car wrapped up in a practical front-wheel drive hatchback. It's pretty much everything I want from a single car. And that concludes the Q&A. Thank you to those who left questions, and if you're interested in asking me any yourself, consider joining my Amateur League tier on Patreon, where I host these every month. For now, let's get back to the run. When we left off, we had just won the GT World Championship, which I think is enough to say that we beat the game. However, GT5 doesn't just end there. In fact, there are many more events beyond this, so how about we see just how far we can get into this game without winning a race? We're now level 16 and have access to the Expert Series. The first event here is the Tuning Car Grand Prix, but having just done a long championship, I don't feel the urge to dive straight into another one. Instead, I choose to do the Schwarzwald League A, a 2-race event for German cars. As it turns out, I don't actually have any German cars, so it's over to the used dealers. What I find there is a pearl brown Audi S4 for around 60,000 credits. This is about the same price as a 2007 Audi TT, but I feel like the S4 has more tuning potential, so I go for it. And it proves to be solid, finishing behind an Opel Speedster in race 1, and then an R32 Golf in race 2, although that one was a bit tighter than I ideally wanted. Now once again finding myself lacking the XP to enter the events I want to, I decide to knock out the International A license, earning a couple of heavyweights for my trouble. This now allows me to take on the Turbo Challenge using the Mitsubishi HSR2 that I got from the IB license. However, this wouldn't be as simple as I expected. One of the opponents in a BMW 135i is surprisingly fast, and the others aren't far behind, so this race at High Speed Ring is only the second where I genuinely lost on pure speed. To avoid any potential disasters in the next race, I splash out on a few upgrades which allow me to keep far ahead of the pack, finishing just behind an R35 GTR. But once again I arrive at an impasse when it comes to my level, so it's back over to the license center for the final time. I only have the super license left, but what makes it unique in this game is that every single test takes the form of a one-lap race. So, as per my own rules, despite this being possibly the easiest super license in Gran Turismo history, I have to finish second in every single test. I also have some major deja vu in the first test as I come in second behind a Nissan GTR Spec V at Monza, exactly like the race I had just done. It was even in the same colour. But anyway, with the licenses done for good and now having a couple more cars in my garage, I've reached level 18, meaning I can take on the Japanese Championship. Rather unexpected by GT5 standards is that this event is actually a 5-race championship, and I decide to stick with my HSR2. In the first race at Tsukuba, I quickly see that the leading Honda NSX is the class of the field, so I decide to act early and take it out. Despite this, such is its speed that it soon starts gaining position, so I go back in for round 2, and even after all of that, it still manages 7th, whilst I finish behind a Honda Accord. Race 2 is at Fuji Speedway, where the NSX isn't as fast, and when a Nissan 350Z overtakes the Accord that won race 1, I give it an easy path to take the win. I also managed to get a Nissan Skyline ahead of both the NSX and Accord in the final corners. And with that, my hard work is done. Even though I'm second in the standings behind the 350Z, I calculate that as long as I finish second behind the NSX in the final 3 races, I would still win overall. So that's what I do, claiming yet another championship and a tuned 350Z. Next up, I dust off the Corvette and head over to the Polyphony Digital Cup, a 3-race championship. Finishing second behind a Mercedes SL in race 1, I hold it up in race 2 where it eventually comes home in 8th. Then all I have to do is protect it in race 3 to balance out the points in my favour and take the event. In case you couldn't tell, I'm getting pretty used to doing this by now. The disappointment of winning another 350Z is quickly washed away by realising that I've now reached the Extreme Series, the final set of events in the game before the Endurance Series. I set my sights on tackling Schwarzwald League B, but even though I have built up a decent amount of money, I don't really want to splash on a new car. So I get back in the iconic brown S4 and shove as many upgrades on it as I think is reasonable. It now boasts over 400 horsepower and is fitted with sport soft tyres. Even still, I'm not sure that it would be enough given the opposition, but when I head to Cape Ring, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that I can keep up with an SLS. The same is true at the Nordschleife, and I'm able to clear the event with no issues. But I'm still stuck at level 20, and with no more license tests to rely on, I have no choice but to head back to the Expert series and a few events that I had skipped over. I first tackle the Tuning Car Grand Prix in my Corvette. The Amuse S2000 is by far the fastest opponent, but I'm able to take care of it in my usual fashion and come out on top. My reward for all this carnage is the HPA Golf R32. Next up, I want to do the MR Sports Cup, but I know the Hommel Berlinette simply won't cut it anymore. After browsing the used dealers, I find this Lotus Esprit, and with a few upgrades, mostly to its engine, I bag 3 more silver trophies. At this point, I'm now level 21 and have a couple new events open in the Extreme series. You might remember the Veyron I won from the GT World Championship. I decide that now is the time to put it to use by fitting racing hard tyres and performing all 3 stages of weight reduction. After this, I head to Like the Wind, an event against some of the fastest cars in the game. But amazingly, at the Daytona road course it can keep up. I finish sandwiched between 2 GT legends, the Toyota Minolta and Pikes Peak Escudo. However, given the car's massive high-speed understeer, I know that it'll get destroyed if I try to do race 2 at Indianapolis. So instead, I check out the other level 21 event, the NASCAR series. Of course, the big downside here is that I have to spend most of my credits buying a new car, but I don't really have many other options. The first race at Indy goes smoothly as I'm able to finish second behind O. Hartman. In race 2, I decide to take out the leader, N. Maldonado, at my favourite murder spot. Despite him only finishing 7th in race 1, I decide it's worth doing since he starts first in every race. This means that I can just follow him in the final 3 races and secure the championship. But although I'm able to manage this at High Speed Ring and Laguna Seca, the final race would be a bit different. Here we're back at the Daytona Super Speedway. Now, unlike the races on road courses, I don't have as much control over the AI's finishing order here. As they race together as one pack, what order they end up in is anyone's guess. Fortunately, I built a pretty big lead in the championship, so as long as I finish in the points, I should be fine. That said, anything can happen, so there's no guarantees. After leading for most of the race, I find myself needing to drop back into second before the finish. However, this doesn't go as planned. And just like that, the second place streak is over. But most importantly, I still win the championship, and by 100 points no less. Now of course, I could have been finer with my timings to secure second, but you have to remember that in a run like this, the worst case scenario is that I finish first, because then the entire run goes down the drain. This is why I wanted to build such a large points gap so that I could play it safe at Daytona. If this ugly 4th place has to stain my perfect runner-up record because of that, then so be it. But with that minor drama out of the way, we're now level 22, which opens up a number of new events. The first one I want to do is the European Championship, which isn't a championship. For this event, I think using the Lotus would be overkill, so I pick the S4 instead. But even still, it's way faster than the opposition, and 3 relatively uneventful races later, I'm now level 23. This means that I can jump straight into the American Championship, which, just like its European counterpart, isn't actually a championship for whatever reason. As the opponents here are noticeably tougher, driving fast GT cars, I need to bring something decent as well. For the first race at Indy, I bring out my Jeff Gordon NASCAR, which works well, as I'm just able to slot in between the 2 Ford GT LMs. However, I'm not sure if it would be good enough at Laguna Seca, so I switch over to the Corvette, where I finish second behind the mighty Chaparral 2J. I'm not sure whether to count this as a race that I lost on merit, as yes, the 2J was much faster once it got in front, but given that I spent the first 2 laps following the C2 race car that was in the lead, I think I could have broken away if that's what I was trying to do. Either way, the result is still the same. At this point, I'm still level 23, with the final event in the series, the Dream Car Championship, being just barely out of reach. At the same time, I also have just under 1 million credits. After considering buying a GT500 car for the Super GT event, I instead opt for the Lexus ISF Racing Concept. This one-off model was built to the DTM rules of the time, and in GT5 it's eligible to enter the German Touring Car Championship. This is especially useful considering all of the other cars can only be found in the used dealers. In classic GT5 fashion, this quote-unquote championship is just 3 single races. In the first one at Cape Ring, I finished second behind an M3 GTR, at Nürburgring Short it's an Audi A4, and finally at the Nordschleife it's a repeat of 1993 with an Alfa Romeo 155 coming out on top. And just like that, I find myself at level 24, with only one final challenge left standing in my way. For this, I need to come prepared, so I once again turn to the true MVP of this run, my Corvette Z06. Using the money I have left, I decide to go all out. Remember the racing modification I wanted for the GT World Championship? Well, now I have the cash, there's no reason not to get it. With the car now looking the part, I have to make sure it packs a punch. So as well as getting the final 2 stages of engine tuning, I also buy a supercharger, bringing the total output to 824 horsepower. Again, this may sound like overkill considering I don't need to win any of the races, but I have a feeling that it will come in handy. And so I head into the first race of the Dream Car Championship at Indianapolis. The grid for this event is made up of various GT original race cars. From previous experience, I know that the Ford GT LMs would be among the favourites, with there being 3 of them in total. With the Spec 2 test car starting first and quickly pulling away, I decide that it's a lost cause and focus on trying to hold the others back. What follows is a very tense 10 laps where I try to keep the 2 Fords at bay whilst trying to help the other opponents, such as the XJ220 and GT by Citroën. In the end, I'm just able to create an ideal buffer and make use of my extra power to still claim second at the line. The GTs that I was holding up come home in 6th and 8th places. With Indy being an oval, I know that it's most likely the toughest challenge I'm going to face when it comes to manipulating AI positions. For race 2 at Monza, my new goal is clear: take down the Spec 2 test car that starts from pole. And with this in mind, I don't waste any time, putting in a trademark Monza T1 lunge and spinning it down the order. Back there, I also find the Spec 2 race car and the Citroën which I had helped to 3rd at Indy. But rather than trying to hold them up on my own, I make use of the slower Camaro LM. By going side by side, we form an all Chevrolet roadblock, meaning the cars behind have no way to get past. It was an ingenious idea, until I get pit maneuvered on lap 2. However, through some interesting tactics, I am able to restore order by the end of lap 3. Now you might be wondering why I'm so desperate to hold these guys back. Well, the thing is that the races in this championship are noticeably longer than any we've encountered before. What this means is that if I send a car to the back early on, they still have plenty of time to regain those positions. And so I continue my strategy of holding up the 3 cars until the end of lap 7 when only the Spec 2 test car is left. At this point I decide to make a break, only having 3 laps left to go and with a 43-second gap to the leader. This is where the 820 horsepower really comes in handy, as I'm just able to haul my battered Corvette back into second. Not before balking the GT-LM and allowing the Nissan GT-R concept to sneak past the 3rd. With the Zonda LM taking the win, it's now dead even at the top of the standings, meaning that for race 3 at Tokyo Route 246, I now have 2 targets. A couple of first lap attempts on both the Zonda and Spec 2 test car don't really pay off, but I am able to get a good shot on the latter at the start of lap 2, and then do the same to the Zonda not long after. With both of my key rivals exactly where I want them, I yet again deploy the all Chevrolet roadblock to increase the gap. By the end of lap 5, now 36 seconds in arrears, I make the call to gun it. Compared to Monza, I don't have as much of an advantage at this track, yet I'm still able to claw back second behind the Spec 2 race car. The Zonda and test car meanwhile finish in 7th and 8th respectively. With just 2 races to go, my lead is now 55 points, meaning that so long as I finish second in the remaining races, I can seal the deal. As such, race 4 at La Sarthe is a fairly simple affair, as I just follow the Spec 2 test car for the whole race, with no major challenge from behind. However, as I head into the final race of the championship and the entire run, the game has one last curveball to throw. Because for the first and only time in this career, I'm greeted by wet weather, and at no less a track than the fearsome Nürburgring 24 Hours. Despite this new variable, my task is still the same, and so I quickly make my way up the order to tail the Spec 2 test car. However, as the race goes on, the track gradually becomes drier, and by the end of lap 2, heavy wet tyres are no longer the best choice. With the leader peeling into the pits, I follow suit, fitting a more suitable set of intermediates. Unfortunately, I'm held up by the Honda NSX as I try to leave, dropping a place to the Zonda LM, but I spare no time in getting it back. And after a third and final lap of following the Ford in front, I cross the line in second to win the Dream Car Championship, the final championship in GT5. After everything that transpired, I suppose it's only fitting that my prize is a Ford GT LM, specifically the Spec 2 race car. But much like the GT World Championship, I earned something much more important, because here I'm given the second end credit sequence, signifying the ultimate ending of the main career. So after our long and winding journey, I can now definitively say that yes, you can fully beat Gran Turismo 5 without winning a single race. 71 races, 8 championships, 0 victories. Strange statistics for a strange challenge run. Well, I said I wanted to do something unique, and I feel like I've achieved that. Before I started this run, I knew that it was possible, but only in theory. When considering the reduced prize money, reduced prize cars, and then throw in the restrictive level system on top of that, I really had no idea if I could actually pull it off. But thankfully it all worked out, and I was able to achieve pretty much everything I wanted to. Now, there's no way for me to know this for certain, but I'm pretty confident that I am the first person to ever beat GT5 without finishing first in any race. It's an achievement that can be both impressive or not, depending on how you look at it. Anyway, I'll be the first to admit that a challenge run like this doesn't really showcase why challenge runs of the older GT games became so popular, because a big part of it is down to enjoying the experience. However, I simply cannot recommend anyone to try this challenge themselves. Let me put it this way, the run itself lasted more than 15 hours total, and most of that time I spent following around AI cars at reduced speeds. Now you might be wondering why I didn't just drive at my own pace and then drop back at the finish, but the truth is that I was simply scared that I'd forget. When the run lasts as long as this, that wasn't a risk I was willing to take. So the few moments of actual challenge and tension simply can't make up for the mundaneness of the rest of the experience. I guess it's not really surprising that no one else has attempted it. But that said, I don't regret it at all. The whole idea for this run came from a random thought I had one day, so to follow through and actually prove my theory is really satisfying. And hopefully, if you made it this far, you found this video at least somewhat entertaining, and that's what really matters. Anyway, if you have any bizarre or strange challenge run ideas of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments. Who knows, maybe I'll put them to the test one day. For the sake of Gran Turismo science, of course. With that said, thanks for watching, and have a good one.